a lot of the things in our life, not necessarily everything. I think we have a soul curriculum where we come into this life to experience certain things that are needed to become who we truly are, or soul lessons, so to speak. That's just my belief system. But I also really can understand and see how so much of what we're experiencing.
Awekenge, this is Mental Metals, hosted by Asego Toto.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mental Matters. I'm your host, Asego Dodo. And before we dive into today's incredible conversation, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy what you hear today, please take a moment to rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but also helps others discover the valuable insights we share every week. And if you find today's episode particularly inspiring or insightful, don't forget to share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think could benefit from it. Thank you for your support. It truly means the world to us. Now, let's get back into our conversation.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the emotions that I was experiencing after my marriage broke down and my divorce and my mum passed away back in 2008, I was completely distraught at that time. My world as it was felt like it had completely ended. I felt like the rug had been pulled out from underneath me. I had lost completely my sense of self, both through the marriage, but also through just losing the foundations of who I thought I was and what I thought my life was about as well. And not only losing time with my kids, which was extremely valuable to me, but also, navigating that grief of losing my mum as well. And I felt so lost and essentially kind of drifting out at sea. I remember saying to a friend, I felt like I'd landed in this foreign land that I didn't know how to speak the language, and it felt like everything was just honestly upside down. It was a very, very, very challenging time.
And I can relate in terms of losing a loved one. In terms of it really hurts and you don't know how to react towards it. And I can look back when I lost my own grandmother. It was hard because I was the one who was supposed to be reading her eulogy. And in the middle of reading it, tears just went down and I couldn't understand why, because I wasn't someone that usually cried when it comes to these things. I always, in a way, I felt like I was expected to be that someone who would remain strong within all of this. And just my mother was crying, my aunt was crying, even my cousins were crying, even my brother was crying. And I couldn't understand it. I tried to make sense of it. How was it possible that I was crying? And it was really hard. And one thing that I've recognized is the fact that through all these griefs, all these funerals that I have attended, through all the grief that I've come across, and one thing I realized, I've put it aside in a way, and only to realize it this year that no, I have a problem and I have been internalizing these feelings of losing loved ones. And it is really different. And onto you, in terms of losing your mother, how did it affect your mental well-being?
Yeah, I think just with what you were saying before as well, to Aseko, with, you know, the unexpected emotion, I think that is how it comes up. It's at random times when we least expect it, or in the most unexpected ways, or sometimes it's the smallest things that might trigger, you know, an experience of grief. And even recently I became a grandmother myself back in May last year, and that created tremendous amounts of joy and conflicting grief as well at the same time, because I so wished that my mum could be there to experience that as well. So I think, you know, in terms of like how grief can impact our mental well-being, certainly from in my many years of experience since that particular time now as well, is when we're not able to process that, often it can drop the body into what many deem as the freeze state within the nervous system. And because grief in itself, I feel, is such a physically exhausting emotion, because it's very low vibration, it's very low energy emotion, and not to make it wrong in any way, shape or form. It's just, it's just the experience of grief is a very dense, heavy emotion. And when we're in that, certainly from a mental aspect, it is so hard to think about things that we are grateful for, or even to find our joy. I remember even feeling guilty for laughing, or for, you know, wanting to enjoy life again, because it felt like it wasn't loving enough or respectful enough, or it wasn't I felt like I was dishonoring or being disloyal to my mum in some way by getting on with my life and being happy, even though I logically knew it was absolutely the very thing that she would want me to do. So, yeah, I think from a mental aspect, we often can close off ourselves. We can feel very isolated from others, because grief is a very personal journey as well. And nobody else can really get or understand how it actually feels for you in that moment. And I think the more that we can come into acceptance of that other people won't understand, and that's okay as well. And obviously, you know, we can have similar conversations or similar journeys with other people that may have experienced grief, but for people around you that have never experienced that depth of loss before, it's very hard for them to fathom what you're actually navigating at the time. And I think that in itself can be isolating for our mental health and well-being.
It's a fascinating answer and an intriguing one also. And you mentioned that you mentioned being away from your children, and I would like to ask, how did that thing, the grief that you've come across in losing a mother, especially a mother? I feel like losing a mother it's different. It's a different thing when it comes to a mother, because it's someone that is very close to you, and someone that I believe, on my side, my mother has always encouraged me to do more. She has done things that were things that she couldn't do in terms of sacrifices. So I would assume that in that way also, I feel like your mother sacrificed things for you. And how did it impact your relationship with your daughter, having this traumatic event happening to you, and also being your marriage ending?
Yeah, I think I have a very close relationship with both of my girls. They're now 21 and 23, but they were 6 and 8 years old at the time. And I think for them, you know, being able to fathom the loss of their grandmother at that time as well was huge. So I felt like I was there trying to support them. I was also supporting my father, moving through his own grief around losing his wife. My mum's parents were both still alive, and her father actually is still, in fact, alive. And navigating all of that was really tricky. And I think at times, like because of our own personal grief or our own personal loss, we want to close off, or we feel like we need time to ourselves to process our grief. I knew from my kinesiology training and that it was very important that I keep that grief moving, not locking it in or suppressing it, because certainly from what I've witnessed and seen and worked with people over the years, when we suppress any emotion, not just necessarily grief, but suppress any emotion, it really does impact our physical well-being on so many levels, because all of that's locked in the nervous system. And so as we're like taking time to process all of that and move through all of that, it can feel like a very lonely and isolating time where we want to withdraw even from our closest loved ones. And I had to be very aware of making sure that I was available and present emotionally for my daughters at the time as well, because I was aware that they were navigating so much change, so many transitions in their own life, from their family life changing so radically as well. But I really did have this line in the sand moment where I remembered I had so much going on at the time. I was starting a business. I'd literally started my business a month before my mum had passed, and I was still working full time. I was studying, I was adjusting to becoming a single mum. And I had this line in the sand moment where it was a Sunday afternoon. I was laying on my bed. I was crying and crying. And I just went, my girls were in the lounge room and playing, and I heard them. And I was just like, I have to find a way out of this, because I can't keep doing this. This is not the mum that I want to be for my daughters. So in that moment, I really made a very clear decision in myself to find another way to figure out how to actually navigate all of this and to improve my life and improve how I also felt about myself as well, because I was very much affected by self-hatred and self-loathing at the time, because I'd never learnt how to actually love and validate myself as well. And that was a huge part of also losing my mum. As you mentioned, they're often our biggest supporters and our biggest cheerleaders. Not always the case. I want to honour people that have had a difficult relationship with their mum as well. And that comes with like a whole other set of grief and emotions to process as well. But for me, my mum had been incredibly supportive and had felt like my rock. And so it was really about learning to find that strength within, and knowing that who I wanted to be. And I guess honouring my mum through that in who she was for me, and me wanting to be a great role model for my daughters as well. So we had very open discussions in our family, like with my daughters, around their grief, their feelings. I really wanted to make sure that they felt safe in expressing their full range of emotions as well, because I think that's important from a mental health perspective.
And you mentioned Kenneth. So can you help me pronounce it? It's kinesiology, if I'm not mistaken.
Kinesiology, yeah.
You embarked on a journey of self-discovery, kinesiology, life coaching, and various modalities. What drew you to these fields?
Sorry, I just missed that last part of the question a sec ago.
What drew you to these fields in terms of various fields? Kinesiology, life coaching, and various modalities when it comes to transformation and mental health as a whole.
Yeah, kinesiology is an amazing modality in terms of like bringing about greater awareness of what's actually impacting us physically, mentally, emotionally, and even spiritually. And for those that don't necessarily identify with spirituality as such, it's really just our connection to ourselves and to our own higher truth as well. And often when I'm working with people around what they're experiencing in their life. It's really looking at our belief systems and what are the thoughts that we're telling ourselves or saying to ourselves on an everyday level that are actually impacting us. And kinesiology actually allows us to test the biofeedback of what's actually happening within the body when we say or think particular thoughts. And that could be an empowering thought or a disempowering thought. And basically it's testing the muscles, the integrity of the muscles, the strength of the muscles. And a muscle will actually unlock or become weak when we're actually stating negative statements such as I'm not good enough, or I'm a failure, or I'm not successful enough, or any of the other beliefs that can be very painful that we may hold as what we believe is our truth in that moment. So kinesiology is a great way of understanding